I'm just going to come on to settlement agreements quickly. These are quite juicy, so you probably might be quite interested in this one. So settlement agreements, they are quite interesting really, and what I like to sort of say, well, sad as it sounds, capability, disciplinary, and all of those bits and bobs and things like settlement agreements are kind of what you do HR for, essentially. I think they're your bread and butter. They're what you learn about, and what you make sure you're always clear on. And settlement agreements is always a good one to learn, because if you get it right, it can be mutually beneficial for both parties, and is usually a preferred route for smoothly getting rid of somebody, basically. Ending the employment relationship. So, quite often a settlement agreement is referred to if an employer or an employee wants to prevent going down a long, drawn-out disciplinary procedure or a performance management procedure, or potentially redundancy. And I've put here, in real-life situations, they're also often used if the company knows that a fair process hasn't been followed. So if the company, if somebody does something wrong, and I don't know, maybe a procedure's followed and certain things are missed, certain things aren't done properly, a company may decide, oh, we didn't follow a fair process there, we haven't followed a fair process there, so we're not going to be able to end the employment relationship through dismissal. We've now set ourselves up for a fall, because if we decided to do that, that's a huge risk. That individual could come back to us, and it could be, they could take it to a tribunal, and we could be found guilty of unfair dismissal, or because of incorrect procedure, which could cost the company a lot of money. Much cheaper to say, okay, boo-boo. So what we're going to do is we're going to meet with this individual and say, relationship isn't working, is it? You've done this wrong, you've done that wrong, but we know that perhaps things haven't been done the way that they could have been done. So our reason for offering this agreement, which is an undisclosed conversation, can't be referred to in a court of law, but we are going to offer you this amount of money to leave. And usually the individual would make a decision on that, yes or no. So you would usually have at least a 10-day negotiation period. So you'd offer on this date, and you'd say, right, we need an answer by this date. They have to seek independent legal advice, and that independent legal advice cannot be a solicitor or a lawyer that's got anything to do with your business. If they're found to have anything to do with your business, it's an unfair process, and that then can go to tribunal. So this is also actually a process that you do need to get right, because if you get this one wrong, then actually it could go to tribunal and you could still be in a bit of trouble. So they have to seek independent legal advice, and that I would always suggest that a settlement agreement comes directly from the lawyer, not from the individual. So preventing you from going, there you go, and them going, yeah, I've seen Joe blogs at such and such solicitors, and yeah, I saw them and they advised me, but actually I've just taken the 250 quid that you've given me to do that and just pocketed it. There you go, signed it. No, we would always require that document, that settlement agreement comes back from the solicitor, that they've seen, say, yeah, read through this, advise my client accordingly, and this is the signed agreement. Usually they are going to negotiate the amount that they get, usually. I don't think I've had one case where they've not. Then they return to work knowing that they aren't wanted. So kind of doesn't really happen, really. But it probably has, but not in my experience. But yeah, they would return to work.
I guess they'd be watched.
Yeah, and you'd end whatever process that you felt you'd done wrong, or because so when you I think I've put up there as well. Yeah, you've got to refer to the reason for choosing a settlement agreement. So it might not always be that you followed a process incorrectly. It could be redundancy, and I've had settlement agreement conversations where it's been because of redundancy, and actually we just want to save ourselves some time. We've got 6 managers we need to get rid of. They cost the business a lot of money, and naturally, yes, it's going to cost the business a lot of money to get rid of them, but actually, less time and pain and embarrassment than going through a redundancy process. Yeah. Because they especially if they're kind of managers, directors, they've got to go through that redundancy process in front of their team. Yeah. It can be quite it can take its toll. So this is an option to prevent that from happening. So you in your settlement agreement and in your documentation supporting the agreement, you need to state the reason for choosing the settlement agreement, and it could be that your role is no longer substantiated or required within the business. So we've taken a decision to have a protected conversation because it's, because we feel that will be a mutually beneficial route to end the employment relationship. So yeah, and obviously then if that individual said, no, I don't want to enter into a protected conversation and I don't want to sign the settlement agreement, they then go down a redundancy situation. But that's where you always make the amount in a settlement agreement more appealing than a redundancy payment. So the calculation that you use the calculation that you use to decide what you want to pay within the settlement agreement again needs to be really well thought out, because if it's because of redundancy, it needs to be more attractive than the redundancy payment. Because if that individual then doesn't do the settlement agreement, they're obviously in a less favourable position financially. So it's got to be written. If it's not, it can't be that you've had just having a conversation. Oh, we'll offer you £6,000 if you go. Do you want to do it? It's got to be written. You've got to have taken legal advice when writing it. Your company may have a bog standard one that they then tailor and then they amend clauses accordingly. But I would always suggest, if it's a senior role and or if it's a substantial amount of cash, that you seek legal advice, or if it's a difficult reason, if your reason for doing it is a bit more complicated than kind of redundancy or unfair process. So I've also had an individual where we in the past where somebody was off for a while and absence wasn't managed for a particular period of time, and then the manager wanted to then suddenly start managing the absence, and that individual took offence reacted badly to the absence suddenly then being managed, having not been managed before. Again, an incorrect process has been followed within the business, and that's at fault of the business. So having wanted to then manage the individual through absence, and potentially that would then may have led to their dismissal from the company, it wouldn't have been a fair process to do that because it hadn't been managed before correctly. So a decision was taken to offer the individual an amount to then part ways mutually with the company. So again, like I say, must seek legal advice, 10 working days or more to sign. So if you see the term compromise agreements, it's the same as a settlement agreement. It used to be referred to as a compromise agreement, but they are actually the same. Your compromise is the conversation, your settlement is the document. I think that's why, because the compromise agreement term is a bit confusing. The idea is that you provide the settlement agreement once the compromise conversation, the protected conversation has happened. You're not going to provide a settlement agreement and that not have happened.